I'm Jeremy Dyson, and in some ways, to the audience gathered here, Steve Pemberton and Reece Shearsmith need no introduction. They're completely unique. The body of work they've amassed over 15 years working in television quite clearly speaks for itself. As writers, performers of their own series and actors in others, Steve in shows as diverse and beloved by mainstream audiences as Benidorm, Whitechapel, most recently Happy Valley. Reece with standout appearances in Victoria Wood's Eric and Ernie, Vic and Bob's House of Fools, ITV murder drama The Widower, and soon-to-be broadcast Chasing Shadows. And of course their work isn't just in TV, it encompasses film, theatre, musicals, with both enjoying regular stints in the West End and the National Theatre. But of course, they're best known as the creators of some of the most original and enduring television comedy of their generation. The League of Gentlemen, Psychoville, and Inside Number 9. They're both truly extraordinary talents. It's been my privilege to work with them over the past 20 years. Let's just have a look at a bit of ET. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve and Reece. Thank you. Does it bother you that often he comes first before you because of alphabetical order? Is that a thing, or is that... Because actually, I know the answer to that, because often you mix... You're very unusual because you mix that up.
I think one time I said, can I be first one, please, on Psychoville, and then it was swapped back.
You would just to always... its rightful, correct.
He just wins it by the fact it's correct to do the alphabetical
the
thing.
Decent thing.
Yeah.
So I've got two memories going back 20 years, because 20 years is when we first started working on the show that became The League of Gentlemen. Working at, it was a theatre show, as it began live. There's two memories. One is of Steve stealing a scene in which it was someone else's monologue. Steve was sat playing a coach driver with his back to the audience, and all he did, his only action all the way through this monologue was just go like that, to wave to indicate his friends, and he stole the scene. And I can remember being in awe of it. And then in the same show, you had a line, you played a grumpy businessman who later went on to become Jeff.
Yeah.
And there was a line of dialogue that's haunted me ever since, which was, I'm full of something nasty tonight. God and Jesus put together wouldn't forgive me the thoughts in my head tonight.
It's just me.
I'd never heard anything like that. Where did that line come from?
God and Jesus put together. I can't remember. I think it was the lyrical nature of that was mined from a kind of road, kind of a Jim Cartwright type feeling to the writing. We were kind of obsessed with him and Godber and all those kind of northern with a capital N writers, because we were all fresh out of drama school, and that kind of worthy, dramatic north that they were championing was alien to us, and I think we just found it really funny. So the lyrical nature of that within the rage seemed to suit that character. We never really pursued it with Jeff, but we did with the Legs Akimbo Theatre, which was the North. What was it called? Scumbellina.
Scumbellina,
which was a play about...
Poverty is poetry with an extra V.
Yeah.
Could have been from Jim Cartwright.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I bet you used to remember the monologue, don't you?
I do.
Go on. Blast off, blow out. Yeah. Blast off, blow out.
That's on the spot. Blast off, blow off.
Let off steam, eyes and steel, magnolias only as old as your Felix the cat weasel. Top goes the pop of the range, Grange Hill. Why won't you speak to me, raw land of hope and glory? Us and them, us and them. It was something like that.
Not even his line.
Not even my line. Yeah.
So the theatrical provenance, I think, is worth talking about. Let's talk about origins and where this career's come from. Theatre was really important to both of you, wasn't it? You'd come from drama school, you'd done 3 years at Bretton Hall, and Steve, you'd set up a theatre company called 606 with Gordon Anderson.
One of the first things, because I met this guy Gordon Anderson, who was a colleague of myself and Mark's at Bretton Hall, and he went off to Central having discovered that Bretton Hall was actually really poor at training up actors. And when he came out of Central, we set up this theatre company. So we would put our shows on, starting at the Canal Café Theatre. And it was the beginnings, really, of the sense that you could create your own work and put your own work on. And even though at times, a bit like coming here to Edinburgh, you know, you had 5 or 6 people in the audience, it was a great learning curve. We did everything ourselves. And we put on about, 5 or 6 shows on the Fringe. And the League of Gentlemen really grew out of that because we wanted to do a fundraiser for the theatre company. And Gordon said, well, why don't you do a comedy night? And we get Reece involved and Mark involved. And obviously Gordon was a good friend of yours. And that was really the genesis of the League of Gentlemen, just doing 3 nights as a comedy show.
But you two had already written together before we did that, hadn't you? You'd written...
Oh yes, what became Tom and Jerry?
What became Tom and Jerry? Yeah, because I remember going to another thing, a rehearsed reading of which had the character of Pauline in, which you didn't play. It was played by a woman.
A woman actually played it. Imagine that.
So,
and it wasn't funny at all.
No.
Yeah, no, we did a show.
Pig in a pokey, was it?
Yeah.
She had the same lines.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Earnest, it wasn't Steve doing it, but it was odd. But yeah, we always had that theatricality and that discipline of. Anything we put on, we wanted the audience to kind of sit up and watch it. So it really mattered to us that it was slick. I mean, I think that was one of the things that marked out our first show here in Edinburgh. It wasn't that it was particularly good. As a sketch show, what was good about it, I think, was that the in-between bits were slick. And we really...
You're saying we had good scene changes?
Yeah. But I am. But that mattered. I think it really helped.
I think there was a thing of pursuing excellence, which I remember being struck with at the time.
Yeah.
And that the cues had to be...
Well, yeah, there was a lot of drilling of chairs, the 3 chairs, and I'll put that there, and then you can do that, and then we'll just make it really slick and have no tinkling of a piano and a curtain flapping in the mix, waiting for the next thing to come on.
And observing you as writers from the outside, I would say that applies to your writing too. When you're writing together, have you always been like that with the sketches themselves, making sure that they're as everything's as ironed out as it can be?
I think so. I think we're quite rigorous, aren't we? We don't tend to act things out. One of the first things I remember people always said is, do you just get open a few tins of beer and get a bit pissed and just write down what comes into your head?
Yeah, that's
no!
Exactly how it's going.
You drop the kids off at school and at 9:30 you get a cup of coffee and you sit down and you work on what you're doing that day.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have really crap days, and other days you have a moment where you go, yeah, that's it. That's the breakthrough we're looking for.
I think we really try to avoid feeling like we don't know what we're doing by really talking a lot before we begin even writing, don't we? So we're very sure of what needs to be got out of the scene. So if it's a bit of plot, how to hide it, or what's important. And almost the last thing to be injected on top is, right, well, that's all the nuts and bolts that need to be out there, but what's the funny thing? And that becomes the final layer, really, that we try and work on.
We always do a gag pass at the end of any script where we go, right, is there any room here to crowbar in maybe a visual joke or a sign? I mean, we did that in League of Gentlemen, as you well know. As being one of the League of Gentlemen. We went through and we put in wherever the camera was going to drift across somewhere, we always made sure there was a funny sign or something funny visually to look at. And I think that rigour that we had as a foursome, we've tried to keep going.
And you're both writers and actors. Do you think of yourself primarily as a writer who acts or an actor who writes? I'll ask that individually.
Well, I've never thought of myself as a writer. And I still have a struggle with the thought that it's a thing. I really see it as a means to an end. I only enjoy the execution of it at the end. I find it like work. And I enjoy the thought that I will eventually do it. But the thought of writing for somebody else and just handing in, like what you do, a script to somebody to perform, and you're just the writer element, I've got no interest in it.
And Steve?
Yeah, I think sort of countering that, I probably have come to love the writing more. And so we probably balance each other out quite well in that respect. I'm not that bothered about the by the time that you come to act it all out, the creative buzz has kind of got out of it, and you are rendering what you've come up with. So I think we have slightly different approaches, but that obviously is a good thing.
Now, you have an extraordinary process which I've been lucky to observe over the years. One of the things, we'll try and cover, I think, all aspects of it, as many as we can over this hour. One of the things you do is to take the mundane stuff of everyday life and turn it into something extraordinary. Yes, well, British television had never seen the like. Tell us the journey of where that character came from, if you can remember.
Well, I think the initial thing we did in our first ever show, which was, as I say, was a fundraiser for the theatre company, we wanted to do a stage mesmerist, didn't we?
It was called Mr. Asmodeus.
So that was probably the genesis of some of it. But then...
Yeah, a bad medium.
But I'm thinking of the phone messages left by your landlord. Just tell us about that and how...
Well, we had a landlord called Peter Papalazarou, who may well still be out there renting out flats in East Finchley. And I dealt with him because we shared the flat, and when we both moved in, I dealt with him because Reece wasn't there. And he was very reluctant to speak to Reece or to leave a message for Reece. So the whole Hello Dave thing grew out of, "Hello Steve. Is Steve there? Okay, Steve. I need to bring a Hoover belonging to you. Oh, this is just a saga now." And he would leave these rambling answer phone messages. And for some bizarre reason, we thought, is there a sketch in that? And it turns out there was.
And so something about that then fused with the idea.
Well, then it was you have a memory of travelling folk, don't you?
Yes, well, and the thing of some travelling folk arriving at our house in Hull and wanting to use the toilet, coming in, my mum being reluctant to let them in, but it was, can we use your toilet, please? We're desperate. And do you want to buy some pegs? They literally said that in our kitchen. And my mum was terrified and shut the door in the face. But I thought, it's an early home invasion sketch. I mean, all horror films are that premise now. But I think that was what we were after. I mean, we talked about a thing with them all burst into your house.
I think we might have even
had a home invasion type.
Yeah.
And I think we just, all those elements snapped together. And then the thing of the circus and him being a ringmaster.
That came from the necessity.
That came from that. I mean, the whole thing of, I genuinely think we didn't think of it as blackface.
No, when
I
we
think
first
we thought
performed it.
It was just like a clown makeup, but a creepy clown makeup. We thought it would just be, we wanted to create like a nightmare, like an amalgam of all your, like, Strowelpeter and Childcatcher and that kind of thing, and have him descend on the town of Royston Vasey. And that's what ended up arriving.
And then the final piece of the jigsaw was that extraordinary walk as well, which you provided.
Yes, and that was
where
the
did that come
Browns.
from?
The Browns, which when I was at school, there was a family across the road, and they all walked really slowly and leaning back as they walked and moving their hands like that. And I remember very distinctly when I was about 11 watching the whole pack of the Browns in a full PE game lesson, I was on the school field, so an hour, just the length of the field, and it was only this length. So I don't know why that stuck with me, that walk, and I just kept it for Lazarou. So
that extraordinary character was an amalgam of all these different things.
Yeah, I mean, it's madness in it to think that you could dare to think it was funny, but all those things were funny to us, so I just think we just thought, well, let's just see what happens. I don't know that there's a pass in the writing or the thought process of writing a funny sketch for us, where we think, right, well, we find it funny, we have to do something that makes it accessible for everybody else. And I think that would be where it would fail, probably.
Well, a case in point is we were in a newsagent's in Muswell Hill and buying a newspaper, and a woman came in, clearly insane, and opened the door and said, "Excuse me, anyone got a bottle of orange?" and the man just went, "Sorry, love, no." And we thought, oh, there'll be a sketch in that somewhere. And turned it into Pam Doo.
Yeah. So your process is as well as being meticulous and disciplined, is also very instinctive because you're following a gut sense of, oh, well, that feels funny.
Well, that's the joy of working, first of all, as a group, because when there were 4 of us, we would write, Jeremy and Mark would often write together, and me and Reece would write together. So not only do you have the person you're writing with to bounce things off, you then have this brilliant sort of afternoon session where we would meet up once or twice a week and read what we'd been working on to each other. So then you've got your mini audience who are also your friends and have the same sense of humour. So I think there's a protectiveness about that sort of, we had a very special way of working, and so by the time we were putting it on the stage in front of an audience, we were quite secure with within the 4 of us that it was something that made us laugh, and it's who can who wants to join in that club, really.
Yeah.
And are there anything that you've done where that instinct's been wrong, or where you've done something and it hasn't?
Well, only that sketch you wrote for me, which is called The Randy Rabbi. Where I had to learn all these long Hebrew phrases. And all these Hebrew phrases were perverse acts that the rabbi was... No, that didn't go down very well, did it?
Yeah, that never made it as far as the So, all right, we'll talk more about how that process has developed as you've gone on further in your career. But just before we leave the league entirely, obviously, it was a journey that started with the 4 of us, but then there were lots of other people that came in into that process too. How much do you think that is part of creating the whole, working with those other people?
Well, the league had so many, it began on stage, and then we had the radio, and then here in Edinburgh, and then from Edinburgh 96 we had the Radio 4 series, and suddenly it was right, well, we now have to do an aural version of all these characters, and how do we do that? And we kind of tried to embrace in the radio, the sound, and a lot of characters. In Chinnery was a sound joke, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And Mr. Ingleby, the shopkeeper,
the tiny shopkeeper,
who was varying sizes from like a curly whirly was a ladder to him at one point, and then he was more like a ventriloquist dummy. But that was a very aural joke. And then when we got the TV, it was like, right, now what do we do? Do we have the tuxedos? It was like, is it going to be like three of a kind? And very much audience bound, because I could never imagine Pauline and those sketches. I thought you have to have an audience. Steve is so brilliant with the audience as Pauline. It would be wrong to kind of take that away from the mix. But then we got to thinking it would be great to really make it look like a Mike Leigh and be so miserable looking in that restart room and on the dole. And it's utterly real, but at the heart of it is Steve dressed as Pauline in the front of it, but totally that's not a thing. And that became very much, I think,
but
the
in a way
tenure
that
of the
was
whole thing.
we were very open-minded to all approaches, and we did a very unusual thing.
Did we? Yeah.
We had the whole series commissioned, but we shot episode 1 deliberately 2 or 3 months prior to shooting the rest of the episodes, so that we could learn from shooting Act 1, even though it wasn't a pilot, we had full series commissioned. And that was a great idea. Probably Sarah Smith, who was our producer at the time, who was a very, very strong character and really guided us and drove us. And I think the other key figure was Steve Bendelak, who directed all our League of Gentlemen work, and he had such a filmic sense. He tapped into, because on stage, it was very theatrical. This was our roots. But as soon as we were given access to creating television, we drew on our love of films and film knowledge. And that's where he could bring all that stuff to life. So I think we were incredibly lucky with the people we worked with at the BBC and have been ever since.
And with our design team too, with Grenville Horner,
and Eve,
and Eve Barr, who you went on to work with again in Cycleville, didn't you? So I have a question for you as well about process. Nowadays, when you make television, at an executive level, a lot of people get involved. When we were doing the league, can you remember how many notes we got from channel controller?
None.
From an executive producer?
Yeah. We have always worked with John Plowman as an executive producer, and my opinion has gone from at the beginning going, well, he doesn't do anything, to now, oh, thank God he doesn't do anything. But that's a complete misnomer, because John is absolutely brilliant at shielding you from all. We don't know how many things were posed by channel controllers. We didn't know for a long time that the show was cancelled because before it had even been filmed.
We were on the recce and it had all gone away, hadn't it?
It had all been, yeah, the controller at the time, who's
Mark Thompson,
just said, I can't be doing with this. I don't understand it. I don't know what this is going to be.
He said, I've never seen anything like it.
And this is before we'd even filmed it. But what John did is he allows you to be creative without worrying about all this stuff. And he's very, very choice with his notes. Even when doing Inside Number 9, he'd have 2 or 3 points, always brilliant points that we'd go away and work on. But you don't feel like you're drowning. And I think that can sometimes be the difference if you just get a barrage of stuff from all directions. And I think that's what gives our work, if it does have something that's unique, it's the fact that it just comes from our heads and it's fairly undiluted by the time it reaches the screen. Mm-hmm. And we're very grateful for that.
Yeah, I think we've had in John basically, a champion in the room, and you need someone that's that for you, because we can't do it. We're never invited to those meetings, so it's important that someone's going. I really think we should give it. I don't know what he says, but they've kindly allowed us to do it.
Let's turn to what happened after the league, and so the league wound down, and it was a fairly natural end for us, wasn't it? It wasn't. There was no trauma involved.
No.
And
we said we'd take a hiatus.
Yeah.
So we're still waiting for that to be.
I remember you
over.
saying it's like pebbles in a bag. We need to
polish
each other off. And this sounds wrong.
We're a very close group.
We were at the bottom of the well. We needed for it to fill.
That's right. We needed the well to fill up. So Psychoville then, was that a fairly natural progression for you? What was the journey to Psychoville from the league? What happened? How did that come about?
Well, I think, you know, the year after the League of Gentlemen finished was quite a tough one. I remember feeling really a bit lost because we had been working on that from stage to Edinburgh and radio and TV for 10 years, solidly. That's all we did. We weren't popping up really in other things as actors. That is all we did. And I felt very bereft when it finished. So we talked quite quickly about trying to come up with a new show. We didn't know what it was going to be, whether to do a sketch show again, whether to do a sitcom, something, you know, more narrative. And we just literally went through all of those different genres, and we really liked the idea of doing something which was had a very strong narrative to it, because as we'd gone on, if you chart what the League of Gentlemen, series 1 is very sketch based, and series 2 is fairly, and then we did the Christmas special, and in series 3 you start to see the narrative come into the fore, and we got more and more interested in telling a story over a number of weeks. And so that's what we wanted to do with Psychoville, really, is do something a little bit like that box set culture.
Yeah.
You can't replicate it with 6 episodes, but we wanted it to feel like the kind of show where you were dying to watch the next episode. It was full of twists and turns, full of mystery, but to do that from a comic point of view, that was our big USP, really.
And I think we thought as well it would be appealing to do it with without you and Mark, because it would be suddenly only 2 heads looking at those yellow post-it notes, charting a story where we wouldn't suddenly get 2 extra elements that would also have to be put into that mix, which was what the League was. So that was always a harder thing when we arrived with all our sketches. Like, well, this is all great, but how do we make it a whole? Because we never wanted it to feel like a sketch show. So we thought just with us across it, we might be able to make a full journey to this mystery, and that was why. That's what kind of came out of that. Really.
But we wrote 2 episodes. Well, we wrote 1 episode to begin with, sent it to John, and he says, "What happens next?"
Yeah,
we say, "Well, you have to commission it to find out." And that seemed to work.
Yeah. So it's a story about a group of characters. So whereas you could say the League was very much about a place, although that happened almost organically.
Yeah, that was more.
It was about
Royce and Vesey,
wasn't it? Royce and Vesey and the people that lived there.
Yeah.
This was a story about where you concealed what the connection was between the characters. Which came first, the narrative idea or the characters?
I think it genuinely was the thoughts that they all got the letter with "I know what you did," wasn't it? Mm. Some people get, and you wonder what's this thing? It's a hook immediately. What's that about? What have they done? And then it was, who are these people? And I think we initially began with the joke of that person. So Mr. Jelly, a clown, children's entertainer, hates children. this strange character, Mr. Lomax, that's obsessed with his Beanie Baby collection. Dawn French's character was this nurse that was too attached to her demonstration doll. And so you can do an initial sketch that's that joke.
And I think a lot of those characters, sorry to interrupt you, but that grew out of us having kids as well and having families. So we'd never come across these children's entertainers. There's two who work in the Muswell Hill area called Mr. Jelly and Mr. Jolly. And there's, the midwife character, the Beanie Babies, and all of that. So it's all these new experiences in a way that you're having. And other people will turn that into a family sitcom about stressed parents with a newborn child. We turned it into Psychoville.
We'll watch your clip in a minute, but because we're sort of at the halfway mark, I'd like to take a couple of questions, and then we'll take some more questions at the end. But does anyone have a question at this point they'd like to put to Stephen Reece? Don't be shy.
No one's bothered?
No. All right. Oh, yeah, go on.
How big a thing is it being talked about? How much has that brought you together at the beginning and then kept you going?
Yeah, well, our love of horror, I think, is born from, well, for me, it's the unknown. When you sit down to watch a thing and it surprises you, or makes you feel something, and I think that's what we try to do with our telly. I mean, I'm wearing my Shining socks. Look at that. That's the Shining carpet. And it's steeped in, and it was what bound us together. I mean, it was such a collective, shared childhood we all seem to have, and that's really helped, I think, as a shorthand. But the telly we've made, it's increasingly deadly serious. You know, there's a lot of people would argue that it's not funny at all, but I'm not sure that it's as dark as people say it is. But we love the elements, the drama elements, and that comes from the high stakes in the things that are at people's lives at peril. Is great television. I think it's fantastic to watch, and I think that comes out of the greatest respect for the horror genre, which is a much maligned thing. I think people find it dumb. But I mean, I think you said a thing, or Andy Nyman said a thing about critics not liking the horror genre because they have to
in the same go. Yeah, they don't like broad comedy. It's the same thing, is it?
Because it means that it's a visceral thing, and they've got to be beyond it to be able to objectively look at it, and you can't do that if you fully engage in it. But so we've really tried to kind of put that into our. I mean, it's not always horror. Sometimes it's more psychological and thriller. But it's just the love of the drama and the proper acting of it. I mean, I think people mistake it for it being a bit camp or grotesque, and it might be. But I think it's always a root of reality in all our. Because
it's never really parody. That's the thing.
Exactly. It's not like airplane comedy where there's a genre that's been.
It's not Scary Movie. It's never been that.
No, we try to do the horror and do it properly when those elements are there. In the Christmas special League of Gentlemen, we try to do the proper beats of the Luton bus and all that kind of the drawing in of the audience and then the release. And the same with Inside Number 9 and the Halloween special of Psychoville was like that. There was proper scary bits in it, hopefully, that we tried to do. It's hard. It's really hard to mix the two and get it and have a successful. It's either not funny or it's too frightening and just not a comedy. But hopefully the mix is, and the fact that we care about both of those things is evident, I hope.
Let's use that as an opportunity to have a clip, please, from Psychoville. Goodness me. Can you remember where some of that came from?
It's that documentary, isn't it? What was it called?
There's a documentary about Blackpool. David Thewlis going back to Blackpool, and there was a landlady in it who did Tina Turner for her guests every week. And
Party night. And it was that was the look, exactly. We watched.
Was the tights from that, or was the tights from the Barron
No,
Nights?
she did it with Gravy Browning.
Right.
We thought that might be not very tasteful.
Tights were
It's Barron Nights.
Tights were the Barron Nights, yeah.
And the Brother Lees used to use...
Oh, Brother Lees, not Barron Nights.
Yeah.
Brother Lees. Yeah. Because it was interesting for me watching Psycho, because I knew nothing about it while you were doing it. I deliberately kept it like that. I wanted to watch it as a punter. and then, you know, seeing these fragments where I knew where a bit of it had come from, or had a sense of where, because it was stuff that we'd perhaps
Must have been
talked about.
strange for you,
yeah. Then not being able to reverse engineer where something as extraordinary as that. Now there's another thing. There's a real dance, of course, with taste, bad taste in that.
Yeah.
What kind of debate, you know, which is a thread going through all your work?
Of course.
Do you debate that about what's permissible, what's not permissible?
I think we know. I think we're aware. We are responsible. I mean, we because we'd seen that with our own eyes in the documentary. It wasn't purely our invention. Clearly, she's got this suitcase under the bed, which she gets out and dresses up and does that. We didn't feel we were making any kind of point. That race has no issue in that sketch. We just wanted to have a sketch where David was telling Maureen she had cancer, and we just wanted it to be the most
inappropriate point.
Break
that news to someone.
Yeah.
And then the hysterical bit, which is not on there, when I take the wig off and I look like Homer Simpson. I said, "How long have I got?" And it just got funnier and funnier. I don't know how Steve kept a straight face, but yeah, it was that, you know, that friction of that moment and looking like that.
I think it's that tension between what we found hysterically funny and then the brutality of just telling someone they've got cancer, not got. But I don't feel we played it for laughs, and especially there's a lovely scene in the 5th episode of that series where Maureen actually does die of cancer, and it's really touching.
Sad, yeah.
And after she dies, David drags her off the bed, and they do "Oops Upside Your Head" with this sort of dead body. And but not at all with a wink, not played for laughs at all. And I just think it just feels really rich territory to be sort of have the laughter completely constrict in your throat because it's so.
I mean, some of the most delicious times were in Edinburgh and the live shows where you would properly feel that what he's talking about, that kind of terrible, you know, when I was doing Jeff's Best Man speech, which became appalling to hear, and the audience were deadly silent and it was just uncomfortable. Kind of quiet in the Canal Cafe, people wanting to leave, and then allowing and just screwing that knife in, and then allowing it the release of the laughter with the. But it's Mike and Cheryl's day, that, and it was always great to be able to just release it and allow them to laugh again.
The Harelips sketch where I was playing Harelip and Reece was the schoolboy, and we had a real pot of coffee which we made every day, and when I unscrewed the thing you could see the steam. I mean, it was a tiny theatre in the
boiling
presence.
Hot coffee.
Boiling hot coffee, and I did a switch, so there was one cold one and one hot one.
I used to be terrified every night, please.
And the audience could smell the coffee and see the steam, and then I threw it in his face like this, and the shock in that moment from the audience is...
What we're talking about here is drama and theatre.
Yes, totally.
And these were little moments of coup de théâtre that were built into the original League stage shows and then have been expanded upon. So it's one of the things that marks out what you do. And it'd be interesting just to touch a moment on some of your influences, because I remember when we first got together, although there was comedy in there as some of the stuff that we bonded over, equally there was a lot of drama. Like David Mamet was someone that you both loved. Who else would you?
Ken Loach. We loved the films of Ken Loach, especially sort of Riff Raff and
Raining Stones,
and Mike Lee, and I think
Nuts in May, of course.
Yeah,
brilliant.
There's. Peter Greenaway, they felt like a very rich time coming through that sort of 80s and 90s of very fun things that we found hysterically funny but weren't necessarily comedies. And I think we do play, we like to have gags, we like to have very structured gags within the other stuff that we do, and it was just pulling together all these different influences. Like
were there other people out there at the same time who you think were drawing on similar influences when we were starting out? Do you think like
that's
Steve
a good
Coogan
question.
And Julia?
Julia Davis
Julia
definitely when
was
Nighty Night came.
A like-minded, we thought that's the world we're in as well.
Yeah. But when we came to Edinburgh, there was a lot of sketch shows that were fairly shambolic, and we remember watching one, and they came on and said, "We haven't got an ending for this yet, but it doesn't matter, you'll laugh anyway." And we just thought that was really, people have paid quite a lot of money to see a show, so we did rehearse very hard, and we spent a long time in putting a show together, and I think that's...
I mean, it's not rocket science, that, is it? It should be like that. I know
it should be, but the sketch comedy can be seen as a sort of
loose,
loose,
unplugged,
and a lesser cousin, and you can get it doesn't really matter because it's sketchy, and one's crap and then the next one will be on. But we really wanted to put a bit more craft into it than that, and I think at the time that's why I think probably we got the recognition we got, because it was different. And I think now, if you go, I mean, we're here surrounded by probably a lot of great sketch comics, and I think a lot of them, I think we were probably the beginning of a lot of that movement.
So just touching on that formal discipline again, it really came to a head in the first series of Psychoville, with the rope episode 4 of the first series, which has become known as the rope episode, because it nods to Hitchcock's Rope in that it's all one shot and all in one room.
Yeah, it's actually 2 shots, but yes.
Do you want to talk about how that came about?
Well, it was all by accident that episode existed. We'd had a general structure to the series where, kind of, in our minds anyway, on the board when we looked at the story threads, every character had an episode, and it was kind of they were the backbone, and then other characters obviously would appear, but it was their episode. You might not really have felt like that watching it, but we felt that's Robert's episode, that's Dawn's. And Maureen and David didn't have one, and it wasn't, I don't know why that was, but we just did it. And then it was like, John Plowman came to us and said, could you do, we can get more money for a 7th episode, but could it be cheap? Could it be, say, like the EastEnders, the Bottleneck episode where it's just Dot in a laundrette? And could it just be you and Steve in a room? And I think that's what happened. And then we got to thinking about Maureen and David. In fact, we didn't have a story for them, and we thought, could we do a rope? And we thought of rope because of Hitchcock doing these 15-minute takes or 10-minute takes, and then moving into someone's back and pulling out again. That would be the cut point. And we thought, could we do a half hour of telly? At one point, it was going to be live. Remember that? It was going to be a live episode. And we wanted to do the whole thing in one take. And we were thwarted by technology because the arm of the dolly had to be powered up again after 20 minutes. So 22 minutes in, we had to do a cut, which happened on the back of the trunk, just like in Rope, where the body is hidden. And then the last 11 minutes was to the end. Very theatrical, because it all had to happen in camera. There was a bit where I hang a body on the back of a door, and it was weighted, and then the door opens and a knife goes in the body, and that was all kind of switched with little trapdoors and magnets, and it was great. It was such an achievement, not just for us as actors remembering it, but just everybody, because the whole thing was a ballet with everyone moving the furniture out as the camera moved in and moved back out.
How long did you have to rehearse it?
And we had 2 days, did we?
Day and a half.
A day and a half, because we only had Mark for half a day. And we thought it'd be great if Mark Gatiss would be the 3rd character in the story. We thought it'd be great. In the end, I'm really glad it was Mark, because we was talking not initially of it being Mark, but then we thought, we've got no time to rehearse this very complicated thing. It'd be so good if we could get him, who we knew could just fall in.
You need a shorthand, don't you?
Yeah.
I think when John first suggested it, our first reaction was, no, why would you want to do, you've got this multi-stranded thing. Yeah. Why would you want to... But then if you make those restrictions work for you and see them as a positive, we thought it could be really something special.
Yeah, it wasn't like what could ultimately be perceived as being a trick or a gimmick. It was born out of those 2 characters, which actually felt quite good.
And full of really hysterically funny lines as well. You didn't sacrifice the comedy to...
Yeah, hopefully not. I mean, it is very self-contained. It's like a little play, that episode, yeah.
So because I'm aware of time, let's take the leap from that episode into Inside Number 9. When you were conceiving of Inside Number 9, were you drawing on your experience having made that episode at all? Was that?
Yeah, I think so. I think we really enjoyed doing that. We enjoyed the discipline of that, and I think there's something about not leaving a room, and there's something that felt really exciting about it in this day of fast cuts and things. The TV has sped up so much. About going back to those play for todays and those thing of one room or one set, and again coming back to the theatricality, that was a big thing. We'd both just come off the back of, I was at the National and you were in the West End, and we thought it'd be great to do something like those filmed plays, which we don't seem to get anymore.
No,
and then we drew on the sort of tales of the unexpected element as well, where each one had a little bit of a twist to the tale, or it doesn't have to be as prescriptive as that. And we thought that could be quite exciting territory and something. We've always wanted to do something that's not in vogue at the time. So Psychoville, this sort of comedy thriller. Now you've got stuff like The Wrong Mans and that prison one, Bad.
Orange is the New. Which prison?
You worked on it.
Oh, you mean Dead Boss, Sharon?
Dead Boss.
Yeah.
There's a lot more of that, but at the time there wasn't that much. And similarly, it felt like a good reaction to this very fast-paced TV, just to slow down a bit and set things. So that was the thing. Each one's going to be its own story, and we're going to limit the action to one set or one place.
I mean, it's a hard sell. It wasn't instantly, oh, that's great, let's do that. It was, there were BBC a while thinking.
How many scripts did you have to write for them?
We did 3.
You did 3 before the script was
greenlit? We did 2 and then another one, and then finally they said, oh, go on then. But it was, I think the thought was you're not gaining an audience. Each week you're starting again, and that's very unappealing. But the counter argument when we did Psychoville was that, well, what if you want to join it in episode 4? You won't be able to follow it. So it was like that was the absolute opposite of what you're telling us now, which was we can join it in episode 4 because it's standalone. But I think ultimately we didn't care about any of that. We just thought if the stories are good, then you watch it. And I think audiences are that. And I think that then there is a thing across it which is our sensibility, and then that's what you're getting. But they were good stories, I hope, and I think they hooked you in, and that's what was fun about them.
Again, as a punter, I think one of the things that floored me with it was the formal challenges that you'd set yourself. And then, met them. Perhaps none more so than in Quiet Night In, which is an entirely silent episode. We've got a clip, actually. Can we see a bit of Quiet Night In? So your director there was David Kerr. How much did you work with him in advance on it? What was the process there? Because it feels like you would have had to. Was that the case?
Well, we wrote it with... I don't quite know how the geography of the house was important to the script, and we wrote it imagining we would find it and be able to alter it slightly, or we would just build the things we needed to be in relation to the things happening, because it was 28 pages of stage direction. And then they found that house, incredibly, and I went one day with him and did a whole day tit for tat going through what we'd written and how it could work in situ. And it was nearly all right, wasn't it? It was very little needed to be changed. We hadn't written any of a swimming pool, and that was added in because there was one. We thought we have to somehow use that. But yeah, it was just a day of going through and he looked at where the shots would be and how we would use the work surfaces of the kitchen in relation to where we'd hide. And we always were quite mindful of thinking, well, how far are we stretching the idea that we could not be seen? And I think John was quite rigorous about, well, I think that's not believable. I mean, even in the midst of all these ludicrous things happening, he would say, I think you'd hear the pebbles. And we were like, well, there was going to be music over it, so you won't hear it. And it was just a funny idea to write, because it's not a silent comedy in the way that we're not doing captions or anything. We're quiet for a reason.
There is sound.
A reason we have to be quiet because we're robbing the house. But yeah, it all came together fine. That was a great find, that house.
Was it harder to write without dialogue-based jokes? Was it? It
was a leap of faith, really. I mean, we could imagine. We've always enjoyed physical comedy. We could imagine how, like the gag we've just worked there. We could. I mean, that is how we imagined it.
Yeah, absolutely. They filmed it from different angles, and I was like, we'll never use it. It'll always just play in that scene creeping in. And he was like, oh, we'll get the size in case. And I was like, yeah, but it's not going to be as funny. I just want him there and then just the lights coming on each time. And it was right. But we didn't think we could do all of it, 28 minutes of silence. We thought maybe we'd get first 10 minutes and then we'll have to speak. But it would be good to get that far in. And then we just kept going, didn't we?
Yeah, I think the more you write, the more adventurous you become, and the more confident you become in your own writing and your own ability to deliver something. And I think it's a hard script to read because it is like a really crap novel. But we knew, you know, each of those stages, like with the two dogs and throwing the dog at the window and him under the bed with the sex doll, we knew we had a good series of set pieces, and we knew there was something at stake that would propel you through the half hour. And I think once you've got that, and you've got some characterization in there as well, it just all came together beyond our wildest dreams, really.
Yeah, it's good.
The other thing I felt watching it as a punter was there was this sophistication to it, this level of achievement that felt like a culmination of a journey.
A culmination?
Well, not a final culmination.
Saying we're done.
But in terms of, as you say, the confidence and just the integrity of each one of them. For example, the cast, extraordinary cast in Sardines. How much were you involved in the casting? Do you?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, we do try to put forward. I mean, we never write with anyone in mind, because then you're only disappointed when you can't get them, or you've really thought about having someone, and then. So it's all very last minute, isn't it? I mean, it was great. These were all very appealing to actors to do, because it was a week, 5 days work when you come and do this. And we just put lots of offers out. We didn't audition anybody. We just said, "You'd be great. Would you please come and do it?" And I think they all said yes, everyone we wanted. And it was lovely, because we've had people over the years say they want to work with us, and that's great. And you got to call their bluff at some point. And they all said yes, which was great.
And did you ever, or do you ever, give notes to actors? Or do you trust and let them do what they're doing?
Sometimes they'll do it far better than we imagined. I mean, Tim Key, that was in Sardines, was brilliant in that part, and I think he brought it and made so much more than was on the page. It was kind of a obvious kind of IT nerd with the way we wrote it, and he made it kind of much funnier than that and subtler, and there's Catherine Parkinson as well. So if you get good people, you hope that they'll do it. It's all about the casting, I think. You can really get a lot out of people, and no one, I don't think, has ever really badly done a part that we've written. They're just not getting it. I think we've never let it dare get to that stage. But there is a little bit of a leap of faith that you think they'll be able to do it. But
also, I think you've got to be aware, as actors ourselves, we know that if you get a note 3 times and they're still not happy with it, you're probably not going to crack it because you don't get it. Yeah. So you're only going to destroy their confidence by keep cracking away at it. And so you embrace what they've brought to it, which maybe is different to what you imagined. But as long as it feels funny and interesting.
Yeah,
we're very collaborative, I think. We're not dictatorial, and that goes throughout the whole process and the editing as well. We're involved right to the end, but it's not our way or that's it. We are, we're always willing to work with new people.
Brian Eno's got the music producer's got this thing. He says that he studied art and art history, and from an early age he cottoned onto the fact that individual genius was a bit of a myth, and actually what drives things he called senius, which sounds like a sort of a bit of a crude pun, but the idea being that what produces terrific stuff is people working together. Would you agree with that?
No. No, of course, yeah, I definitely, we dare not presume we are brilliant at all aspects of.
But you work together. I mean,
program.
starting with the two of you, each of you are able enough to have had a career as individual writer performers, and yet you've chosen to carry on working together.
Yeah, well, I think, ultimately, despite the fact that we do things separately, it's always the most rewarding. It's the most perilous, and everything's at stake when it's our thing again. And at the other end, when it comes out, it's you're to blame if it's not well received, and that matters. And it's like presenting the baby to the world again. And when you're an actor in someone else's thing, it's the easiest thing in the world, really. So you just go in and do the best you can be, but you haven't got the thing of reading the Guardian Guide and what have they said this week and how many stars. But it's great. It's the best of all worlds to think we can write ourselves these great parts, and hopefully just keep doing what tickles us.
Mm.
Let's have some questions. It's that time. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask? Yes, this lady in the front.
I wanted to ask you, your work is so creative, it's heightened and almost surreal for viewers. Was it very different living in such a real world when you played Malcolm Webster?
Yes. It. Well, I mean, it was an odd thing for me to get that part at all, I think. I mean, people haven't, it shouldn't have been, because I am an actor, but for the first time in about, but it apparently only just occurred to people that I was an actor. I got a lot of really nice things said about it, but it was always like with slight, oh. And so that really annoyed me. But I think we've always had that. You always have that strange thing of, which is totally the other way around, where the comedy is the easier thing to do, apparently, and it's so not. But anyone could do a dramatic, you're not asking anything of anyone until the clap at the end, but, do a comedy and no one's laughing, you hear you're failing, and that's a very different thing. But Malcolm Webster was, really a horrible experience to film that, really. And and it was good that it was all contained. We filmed it all in Ireland. And I was kind of in that mindset for that time without my family around. I really felt like I came out the other side of it with a shaved head, which was horrible to return to. I didn't really feel like I was myself again until my hair grew back. But the duty of care and the weight of how he had destroyed lives, it felt a very hugely responsible undertaking to kind of get it right. And I felt that we had, and I felt like right from the start, everyone that had been involved in that, those crimes was on board, all the wives, the ones that were alive, and the brother of Claire who we murdered. So they were all on board and they'd seen the script from the start, so I knew they were all happy with it, if you can be happy with such a thing. So but it crossed my mind every day, are we right to be doing this? Are we giving him, what are we doing, giving him any kind of rendering, As a psychopath, he'd watch it, and he did see it. ITV got a complaint from him, saying he wasn't happy with his portrayal. But because he's never admitted it, he still thinks he's innocent. But so that it was, a horrible experience. I mean, kind of great as an actor, if you stand aside from the ghoulish nature of it, because it was a brilliant part to play. And my version of Malcolm was the version that the wives got, really. I just tried to play him as the convincing, plausible man that they all saw. It was very important to make it look like that the women were not idiots. I think you tell it anecdotally as a story, and they said themselves, I tell this to people and they don't believe it. And so I think it was as an artifact to point to and say it was kind of like that thing that happened to us. I think it was quite cathartic for them, actually. But a very different experience. And I was pleased at the end of it to go on and do back to Inside Number 9. It was nice to kind of just be free of it and be funny again. Because I felt like it didn't cripple me, and I didn't think, I really don't like doing it. I really loved doing it, but I think I do enjoy doing the comedy. And I felt quite like a breath of fresh air to be allowed to have my funny bones again at the end.
Yes, gentleman at the end.
Thanks. What's next for you guys? What projects you have on the horizon?
Well, we've got to write some more number 9s. We've got another series in the pipeline, which we've filmed the first 2 in December, and then another 2 in January, another 2 in February. So that's the layout of the land. We've got a couple of scripts that are kind of roughly written, and we're going to go back into working on those. But that's it, isn't it? We've got to start thinking.
Yeah, it's exciting and also quite daunting, because the first one was well received.
Some good ideas in those first ones.
But that's what we're doing next, and beyond that we're not sure. We'll see what happens.
Steve, you've just completed filming Map and Lucia, which you've written, haven't you?
That's right. Yeah, that was an adaptation of some books by E.F. Benson, Map and Lucia books. So that'll be out at Christmas, and I'm in that as well.
But that's a long beloved thing of yours, isn't it?
Yeah, I've always loved the novels from the original Channel 4 series, so it was a great joy. I heard BBC were interested in developing it, and and I did it without Reece. It's one of the few things I've written on my own. But because you already were basing it on novels, it was a lot easier to get a head start in a way. But it's I learned an awful lot doing it. Put it that way.
Yes, gentleman there.
How do you decide who portrays which characters? Have there been any switches?
Yes, we often have switched. I mean, I remember Pauline from the restart in League of Gentlemen. I did it all the time in rehearsal, and then last minute I said, Steve should do it. I don't know why. I just felt like it. He'd done it better than me.
David and Maureen.
And David and Maureen, we never knew right until the end who was going to play those two. Yeah, they were swapping around constantly.
I think it's quite good to not pinpoint this is my character. Otherwise, when you're writing it, you might become a little bit too obsessed with every line of dialogue for that character. And to make sure every character is one that you would want to play. For example, in Sardines, we didn't know, there was a cast of 12, we could have played any of those parts. And even within the couple, we didn't know which side of the couple we'd be on. But in that way, you're kind of creating each character.
I mean, even in, yeah.
No, we've never fallen out. Well, not really. we've had. Are you sure?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think I wanted to, and then I quickly dispelled it. But I remember in the 5th episode of Inside Number 9, the one set in the dressing room,
The understudy.
the understudy, saying that I should be the other actor and you be the understudy. I wanted it that way around.
Yeah.
Because I felt it was just like another quite straight part for me to play. And it was a bit like the one in Tom and Jerry. And in the end, it was kind of not right that we did that. But it would have been
My
interesting.
argument was I look far too old to play anyone's understudy.
Yeah. But so yeah, not really. I mean, I remember us thinking people might be sick of the sight of us in those Inside Number 9s, which is why we quite deliberately didn't appear in one each, just so that people wouldn't think it was we were terrified of people thinking it was a vanity project, weren't we?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we did. We thought, well, we don't want it to look like it's just those two just doing parts each week. But then Jonathan Ross said to me, just make sure you're in them all next time, which was very kind of him to say. So it made me think, oh, maybe people do actually like the idea of seeing us together in things. But yeah, we were kind of thinking, it might just become a bit like repetitious that we're just kind of...
Also, if you start from a point of view, if there's got to be a part for me and a part for Reece, it kind of limits who your characters are going to be.
We did write the stories and then thought, is there a part in it for us? And then that way it's the best story rather than just shoehorning yourself into it.
Whereas with Psychoville, we just throw a huge cast and we knew we'd just pick and choose.
Lay them all, yeah.
It's time for one more question, I think. Yes, that lady there, yes. Yes, you.
So we've seen that you like to cover dark subjects, like murder, child abuse and sardines. Has there ever been a subject that where either you or your producers had to say that's too far?
Boringly, there hasn't actually, no. No, I don't think we've ever thought of anything they've said you can't do that, guys, no.
I think the sardines one is a good example because it is a very controversial subject and not one to be handled lightly or played for laughs, and we were very well aware of that. We felt we'd handled it very sensitively.
I mean, it's barely in it as the script, isn't it? We went back in. It wasn't in the script, and then we thought, well, let's just add in this extra element. And it's so carefully... There's very little actually mentioned. There's just the odd tension of something in the past talked about, and there's just the odd line. So it's very lightly sketched in.
We actually don't like it when people say, oh, I couldn't watch that, it's too upsetting. I mean, we like to push it as far as we can, but we don't like it when people are upset by what we do. We don't want to drive people away. We want to people who love the kind of same sense of humour to embrace it, but we're not about repulsing people and making people feel sick. We're about, entertaining them, but in a slightly off-skewed way.
Yeah.
Well, on that very positive note, can we thank Steve and Reece for this afternoon and for everything they've given us thus far?
Thank you.